Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, María Tadeo.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us on this session. It's a very timely session, the Middle East and Israel path to sustained peace. To talk and discuss, we are going to be joined by Dr. Anwar Gargash. He is the Senior Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the United Arab Emirates. And we are also going to be joined by Tomáš, Pojar, who is the National Security Advisor to the government of the Czech Republic. So please welcome them for this discussion. Dr. Gargash, Mr. Pojar, thank you very much. Well, thank you for being here with us. I must say, when I was preparing for this session yesterday night, I had a different idea. This morning, a lot of things happened overnight, and perhaps, Dr. Gargash, to start with you. Israel has now struck Iran. There was a big question mark as to whether that would happen, but now we see it as the case. There's questions now in terms of what the response will be from Iran, but also how the region will react, and ultimately the United States. So drawing from your expertise in diplomacy, I wonder if we could get your assessment on the situation.
First of all, thank you very much, and welcome to the Middle East. We were all very struck by the news that we saw unfolding overnight. And of course, the UAE was very quick in coming out with a condemnation of the Israeli attack on Iran. We understand that there are serious issues in the region, but we are very much a believer or believers that these issues have to be resolved politically, and they have to be resolved diplomatically, no matter how complicated these issues are. And I think in our region, we have seen the idea of trying to use a hammer to address many of the issues that are complicated in the Middle East, and they have only failed to address these issues and created what I would call serious also sub-issues. So a real concern at the escalation of the Israeli attack on Iran, a real concern that the Iranian nuclear program, which should be addressed, of course, but should be addressed politically and diplomatically. And now, of course, as we are watching We will see what sort of escalation is in the region. And beyond that, I think, what are the repercussions? And clearly, this is a region that suffers from a multitude of open wounds. We're still trying to address the Palestinian-Israeli issue in the wake of a brutal war on Gaza, and at the same time, we are still trying to address issues in Lebanon and Syria and other areas. So this is a region of various open wounds. And I think the last thing that we need today is to see this unprecedented, really, escalation in targeting Iranian officials and targeting Iranian infrastructure. We still, I think, are not very clear about the sort of total size of the strike and so on and so forth, and also the Iranian response. But I can clearly come and say that the region is trying, and clearly in the Gulf, because in the Gulf, the emphasis really is on putting behind us the whole idea of trying to find military solutions for very complicated, long-term political issues in the region. So clearly, a very distressing, a very serious and troubling moment right now, and we need to look at the repercussions of that.
And Doctor, if I could just do a very quick follow-up. When you listen to the Israeli authorities, the message that is coming across is that they believe Iran is a problem and it has to be dealt with strongly. Your assessment is that they are in some way being irresponsible? They're playing with fire?
Well, again, I mean, ultimately, we have several issues in the region that the UAE has strong views on. But again, I think the clear view here is that military solutions will only complicate the area, the geostrategic scene right now. I think very much, to counter that, we see also after almost 2 years of war in Gaza, we still don't see a way out. We really do need to see a way out. We need a political, let's say, a roadmap that will bring stability there. So clearly, again, the concern, of course, with Iran's nuclear program has been more than a decade old. It's an old concern right now. But again, I think President Trump was quite, courageous in opening a venue for discussion there. And we were very much, we understood, of course, that these discussions are going to be arduous, they're going to be very difficult, but from the region's perspective, a political, diplomatic solution is essential and necessary. Now, as we condemn this Israeli attack on Iran, I'm not sure that it actually offers any solutions also. It only complicates a very, very difficult, picture in the region clearly. But again, we have to, see the whole thing. We have to have a clearer assessment. All these developments have only happened in the last few hours.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Pojar, the European Union and the European representatives put out already reactions saying they are against any regional escalation, that they believe this is still the time for diplomacy. Over the past 2 years, there has been a very delicate balancing act for the EU when it comes to support in Israel, but also the situation in Gaza has become incredibly complicated. Is this going to make it even more difficult in establishing a line that is perceived by the world as fair?
I think the sincere answer is that we don't know. It may bring new positives. I hope anyone in the world but Iranian regime wants Iran with nuclear weapons. And Iran has been the main problem of the instability of the Middle East. Iran has been involved in Lebanon, and it's a great news that Hezbollah has been weakened as a terrorist organization directly subordinated to Iran. It was more complicated with Gaza and Hamas, and not with Palestinian Islamic Jihad, again, the arm of Iranian regime. The Houthis firing missiles not only to Israel, but torturing the world trade has been Iranian arm. So I think it should not be a surprise that, and I'm not wishing, I didn't wish that this will come to this end, or not end, but this development. But it's not such a surprise that if there is a nation which wants to build nuclear weapons, calls for annihilation of another nation, and supports terrorist groups as their proxies, fighting many wars in the region, that it gets hit back, okay? And I'm not judging it, but it's not such a surprising thing. So what is gonna happen in the next days and months, I don't know. Is there a hope that it may be after that possible to achieve more understanding between different nations and countries and inside some nations and countries? The hope is there. For example, now I think there is a great hope in Lebanon that Lebanon will enter a new era and better era, and I hope also with our support than what we have seen in the past 2 decades. But is it guaranteed? Not. Are there many unknowns which we don't know now? Can there be more escalation? Of course. So it's a very turbulent time for already many years in the Middle East, but there is an escalation. And let's hope for de-escalation, and let's hope that after de-escalation, the time will be more ripe for more agreements rather than disagreements.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that the Israeli response, that there is a clear logic to the actions that they take. And again, the Israelis said, Iran is a huge problem, it has to be dealt with.
Well, from the Israeli point of view, and I'm not an Israeli, but I've lived in Israel for some time. Okay, that was a nation which tells you openly, publicly, that it's going to annihilate you. So if you are saying, okay, if someone is threatening my life, then I'm vigilant and I will do anything so that my life is saved. You can always argue if the threats are real or if it's just threats, if it's just rhetoric. But if you are threatening someone, and if a nation threatens other nation for annihilation and for the life, then it's very serious and it has to be taken seriously. So I think that of what the Israelis are saying, it's now the fight for their existence, because they feel that if Iran would get nuclear bomb, their existence would be threatened. And we don't know what would happen if they would get a bomb and when and what would happen afterwards. But this is the feeling, and this is why they have taken the action. And the fact that Iran was getting closer and closer to the bomb has been acknowledged by everyone, including the International Atomic Agency, okay? So they were building this capability, and they were very close. I hope that they are today more further from that goal than yesterday.
So just as a final question, the European Union should therefore support the actions of the Israeli government, and I say this because the reaction that we see today doesn't fully address that. It just calls for de-escalation in the region and diplomatic efforts.
I don't think European Union is there to support Israeli actions or anyone's action. I think European Union should be smart, okay? Mm-hmm. And also we should have empathy for the situation in the region. We should listen to the region and we should look realistically to the options. What are the options? What are the options of someone ruling and someone else ruling? What are the options on the ground? Because sometimes, anywhere in the world, but also including in the Middle East, the choice is between bad and even worse. Okay, so if, I would be more humble into the assessment of what we should say, and also what we can do and how we can contribute. So let's be frank. Can European Union contribute now realistically into escalation or de-escalation besides saying right things? No. Okay, we cannot contribute. So this is the reality, okay? And it's not a shame. It is the reality.
So we're not going to be a player.
We are not a player, and we will not be a player.
And before we continue, there will be questions at the end, so I will be saving time for that. But there's also the possibility to send questions through the Slido app, and then I will make my effort to put them. Dr. Gargash, the timing, however, and obviously we will move on next to the situation in the region overall, which President Trump actually presented as very positive, in fact. And obviously the situation in Palestine and the Palestinian people, but just specifically to end this subject. The timing for many is surprising because the United States was involved in heavy diplomatic efforts with the Iranian authorities over the nuclear program. Do you believe this now puts an end to that negotiation? It changes the paradigm?
Well, I think it's in the air. I mean, I can't come and speculate on that. But what I want to re-emphasize, I think from past experiences in the region, we have clearly seen that military solutions do not really, address serious concerns. And the Iranian nuclear program is a serious concern. But there are so many other issues also in the region that are also of serious concerns. We have never really had a military solution that has addressed these. I think what we have had, on the contrary, we've had military solutions that have complicated the picture. And I think the lessons of Iraq in 2003, 2004, and beyond today, what we see in Gaza, for example. All these, I think on the one hand, we have seen, for example, serious humanitarian concerns. We have seen states that have been torn apart. We have seen the rise of organizations like ISIS, for example, and we have seen states where the sovereignty of states have been very much challenged in many areas. So again, I think looking really at past precedents here, and without actually minimizing the dangers of a nuclear program turning into a military nuclear program. I think these are serious concerns, but these serious concerns today need to be addressed diplomatically, politically. I think as we look, we have a foot in the past and a foot in the future. The foot in the past is basically of trying to do the same thing, which is basically use military force to ensure geostrategic change. I think the cost has been very, very high. The foot in the future really is what us in the UAE and many other countries are trying to do, which is basically to prioritize diplomacy, prioritize economy, prioritize humanitarian concerns. And I think from all these perspectives, I just see that, we have come out very clearly condemning the Israeli attack on Iran, but I see also that our concerns of a more complicated landscape following that attack are part of our history, part of the history of the region. But as where the talks are, as I said, it's all up in the air. It's very difficult to really be clear-sighted right now about how these things will develop. And I think we have to wait and see how things are.
And just because there's a great interest from the audience, if I understand correctly, you're saying to say that this is the end, or the prospects of a nuclear deal are basically over. You say it's very difficult to give a yes or no answer at this point.
Sorry.
You say the idea that a U.S.-Iran nuclear deal, as a result, is over, or it's difficult to put a definitive yes?
I said it's up in the air. It can, again, it's very speculative, for us to come and say how things are, and we're still, trying to assess the Iranian response and what is the damage and what are the repercussions. I think it's up in the air.
And just a final point from me before we move on and we'll put to the audience. There's this idea that ultimately what is happening between Israel and Iran is not so much the idea of a nuclear weapon or the possibility of nuclear escalation, but Israel, and I don't want to be provocative, but we have to ask the question, Israel is trying to create the conditions that could potentially lead to a form of regime change internally in Iran. Is that something that you consider? Is that...
No, again, we've seen in many instances that if a country feels that it is under attack, there is a sense of nationalism that rises. And I think that this is something that should not be precluded. But I think the sense of the question is you cannot reshape the region through political force. in my opinion. And you might resolve some issues, but you create also counter issues. And I think this has also been a major part of how our lessons learned really of the past 20 years. Lessons learned from the past 20 years show us that issues are complicated, but there is no instant solution. And the use of the military is not an instant solution to these complicated issues. And, I'm very concerned, to be honest, about these developments.
And Mr. Pojar, you said at the start, the truth is the European Union can put out many statements, but we don't have a voice. We don't have a role to play. For this audience, that is very disappointing to hear. There's the realpolitik, but it's disappointing to hear that the European Union, which has been trying to become a geopolitical actor and a big geopolitical force, sees a situation like this and can only tweet about it. Why?
Because European Union is not a state that it doesn't have army. As simple as that. So how you can project power if you don't have army? You cannot, okay? So it's not a criticism. European Union is not a nation state. European Union cannot project power by force. European Union by force cannot guarantee any peace and any security because it does not have the means. So what is so surprising? Especially in these tough times when diplomatic means are fine, but diplomacy which is not backed. Diplomacy is fine, but if it's not backed by economy and by army, it's useless, especially at the time of war and turbulence, okay? So if you think that the wars are going to be finished by diplomats sitting around the round table with no other force, no other backing what you can get, how you can guarantee to those parties which are at war some stability and security afterwards, then diplomacy is nothing. So at the end it will end diplomatically. And I am for a diplomatic solution. But let's not, why is US more important in the Middle East, all the Middle East peace processes than Europe? Because it has economic and military means to guarantee something. And European Union does not have it. And it's not a criticism to the European Union. It cannot have it. So let's not pretend that we have something which we don't have and we cannot have. So it's as easy as that.
But if that's the logic, and you assume the European Union is not going to be able to play a decisive role, then when we look at the situation in Gaza, when we look at finding a sustainable solution for the people of Palestine, the European Union and increasingly a number of countries are becoming very vocal about this, is saying we need to pursue the two people, two state solution. If then we're not an actor, then why are we even talking about this?
I think the only thing we can do from Europe is to support reasonable and rational forces on the ground, and to support the settlement, which will come from the region. We cannot impose anything from outside. We should not do it. And even if we wanted to do it, then we are not able to do it. So we should support reasonable players, states, actors, like the GCC, like Emirates, in their efforts to calm down the situation and to contribute to stability. And by the way, I was the one who was supporting Abraham Accords and commanded Emirates for the very pragmatic deals with Israel. And it was at that time opposed by the European Union and by the consensus here. And I think it was a great tool of stability and great platform for a future stability in the region. And those are the processes which we should be supporting. We cannot do it on our own. We should be more humble. And yes, we should support the path to the two-state solution. But let's at the same time understand that the two-state solution if we understand by that the two peoples, two nations will be living side by side in peace at one very small territory, then yes, so that's the path and that's possible. If we think that it's going to be the same construct like the sovereign Czechs live next to sovereign Slovaks, in the same concept of sovereignty as we understand it now in Europe, then we are mistaken. I don't think that it is feasible, and I don't think this will happen because I think it cannot happen. So we should be also more humble by that. But one thing which I can say, it will be much easier to get to some understanding and some two-state solution eventually in the Middle East or in the Palestinian-Israeli territory theater, if the Iranians don't have nuclear weapon, if there is no Hezbollah in Lebanon and if there is no Hamas as terrorist organization running and controlling significant part of the Palestinian territory. Because if the two-state solution is hostage to something, and we can argue and we can be critical, and we should be critical to many steps what the Israeli government is doing. But if there is one serious obstacle, and if there has been one serious obstacle towards reaching the two-state solution, it has been the fact that a terrorist organization was running part of the territory of the future two-state solution. Okay?
And Dr. Gargash, perhaps a response and your thoughts. There's ultimately now a big effort from a number of European countries to engage with the region and find a peaceful, sustained solution that starts around the idea of the two states, and that needs to be constructed. So I wonder if we could get your thoughts on that, but also connected to the events overnight. Are we now to assume or understand that this idea of normalization, or the idea of the return of normal diplomatic ties with Israel now that is going to be it's going to be much harder now?
Well, I think let me start by saying that the UAE condemned the attack, the Hamas attack on October 7th. But at the same time, I think we have seen also the disproportionate response of the Israelis of, many times over destroying Gaza. And we have been, I think, in two things. Number one is we concentrated very much in our policy on three things. Number one is on humanitarian support. 42% of all the support that has gone to Gaza has come from the UAE. And that, I think, has been a main driver for us. But I think what we have been very disappointed with is clearly from the beginning, there has been no day after outlook for what happens next. So what we have seen is just continuing war. And, places that have been bombed again. Places where people have been uprooted have been uprooted again. And as a result, today we have about 55,000 Palestinians who have lost their lives. So there is a huge humanitarian catastrophe there. And I think this is something that has to be addressed. The UAE has done its part. But then there are other parts of the jigsaw puzzle that we are part of the Arab consensus. And the Arab consensus is for an independent Palestinian state. An independent Palestinian state is part of a two-state solution. And up to now, there is no alternative. I mean, although there is an obliteration of the landscape that creates a two-state solution, there is no other vision there. The whole idea of really moving people from Gaza out to distant
you said that's
lands,
red line.
That's not going to go anywhere. That is not going to go anywhere. And I think it is some sort of ideological pipe dream for Prime Minister Netanyahu and others. I think from that perspective, a few years ago we signed the Abrahamic Accords. And the Abrahamic Accords has delivered in various areas, and among these is our capacity to help people in Gaza, because we have to do it through that relationship with Israel. I think in other areas, the Abrahamic Accords has also been stinted because of the almost 2 years of war. But ultimately, the Palestinians deserve an independent, secure state. And I think regardless of what other people say, whether that is doable or not doable, there is no other alternative. We haven't seen any other alternative that somebody can actually buy into and say that this is something that you can buy into. I'm very much struck by various meetings that I've had with Jewish groups, independent Jewish groups. And many of them ask me to emphasize that what we see today as a right-wing Israeli government does not necessarily represent the whole spectrum of how Israel really looks at the prospects of the future. Of course, we have to deal with it because it's the government of the day. But I think from this perspective, you hear a lot of people saying that, this is not essentially representative of the whole vista of how we think. I think definitely there is also a connection. So clearly today, the escalation that we have seen by Israel in targeting Iran is something that will complicate issues. My fear, but I don't want to jump to conclusions, but my first fear is usually when I see something like this is to see if there is an escalatory, sort of momentum in the region. My other fear is what are some of the potential repercussions in the long term. I think in many ways, Israel, and clearly on its policy in Syria, for example, Israel acts very tactically, but not strategically. I mean, there was an opening there. They should have used it strategically in showing the new Syrian regime that we are not the enemy, but rather than that, there was this sort of pounding of Syrian assets, etc., etc. And I think this is a real problem. So the region needs to de-escalate. The region has to understand that military solutions, first of all, are not capable of resolving deep-rooted issues, but at the same time, I think the region also is trying to turn the page. We don't want anybody to try and drag us back. We want to move forward. And I think one of the big things that we need to do is if we continue to act in a militaristic space, then our ability to influence events becomes limited. And I speak even here about the European Union, about us as Arab countries, etc. If that space is more of a political and diplomatic space, then our ability really to try and influence events becomes a little bit larger. More difficult, of course, because these things take time and I don't know what. But clearly, I don't really see that there are military solutions to complicated issues. I just don't see it.
And when you say we need to now work on the day after and the steps that come on the day after, when you listen to the messages of the Israeli authorities, however, they're very much focused on the today. And they say there's military targets that they need to still achieve and have to be achieved. Are we to understand from your perspective, as long as this government is in place in Israel, there is no path to a day after?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the government of the day. You have to deal with it. But you have to understand what is the directions of this government and what it can do and what it can't do. But I think in many cases, we're just dealing with too many problems in the region. Lebanon was mentioned, Syria is mentioned. Definitely, I mean, this humanitarian, colossus, a humanitarian crisis, and thousands of widows, thousands of orphan children, people who were well off or let's say, reasonably well off suddenly are in tents and moving from place to place, trying to feed themselves, feed their children. This is something I think that we have to address. Our conscience has to be there. I look at our effort from following the 7th of October, and I think we came to a conclusion that there are things we can make a difference in, and that was mainly the humanitarian side. And then there are things that we have to act with others in order to de-escalate, in order to find solutions. But it's a very complicated scene, and I think this, as we condemn the Israeli attack on Iran, I think we are looking at a region that, that there is more complication that it just doesn't need.
And now we will open the floor for questions. So if you have a question, please, you can put your hand up and address the question.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Seamus Allen from the Institute of International and European Affairs. So 2 questions. So the first one, we all agree nuclear proliferation is a real and serious problem. So what do we do about the nuclear program of Israel? Because it was Israel who started the nuclear arms race in the Middle East, and not Iran. So what should we do about that, or do the speakers have thoughts? The second question, we've talked a bit about the regional role of Iran, or what Iran has been doing in the Middle East. But Saudi Arabia has been much more aggressive in the Middle East with the help of the United Arab Emirates than Iran has ever been. If you look at Yemen, Bahrain, Qatar, Lebanon, Syria, and so on. So what do we do about those regional aggressors? Because I think we are distracting significantly from that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think on the nuclear proliferation question, I think is important. But I would just offer what the UAE has done. I mean, the UAE had ambitions for a civilian nuclear program, and we did a textbook, plan on how to achieve that without enrichment. Today, we have reactors that are working and providing 25% of our energy in the UAE, and we are not a threat to anybody. So I think this answers, and this is my answer to the first part, that nuclear, with regards to our, not what we say, but what we actually do on this issue. I think vis-a-vis the repercussions of the Arab Spring, the role that Saudi Arabia and the UAE played in Yemen and some of the other also areas during that very difficult times was very important. I mean, we moved to support Saudi Arabia and Yemen based on a legitimate ask by the Yemeni government. It's not like we just jumped in and got engaged there. I think the same calls also for the intervention that was stabilization in Bahrain. Again, we had also that call there. I think again in Libya we were part of the NATO effort also, as Gaddafi was ready to attack a big city such as Benghazi at the time. So clearly, I think without justification or explanation of other instances there, I think in these instances clearly there was a call by the president of Yemen at the time for Arab help. Saudi Arabia built a coalition together. We were part of that, and so on and so forth.
Well, I would like to answer, like to answer the Israeli question on the nuclear. Okay, let's be realistic. So I don't know if they have nuclear weapons, but let's say they have, what you can do about it. The reality is that those countries which acquire nuclear weapons, you cannot get them out of it. So the non-proliferation is about not having more nations having nuclear weapons, because once another nation gets nuclear weapon, then you have a chain reaction that the others want it as well. So let's keep the number of those who are holding nuclear weapons as limited as it is today, and let's make sure that they are non-proliferating. And no one can accuse Israel that it has been proliferating nuclear technologies, and no one can say that Israel has threatened anyone by annihilation using nuclear weapons. And that's the difference with Iran, okay? So let's be realistic and let's see the reality. I don't think it's that, and I think there can be a great agreement. And if I can comment humbly as Central European or as someone from Prague, I think that in the last decade, United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they both have played stabilizing and constructive role in the Middle East, and they have been great partners of us. I mean of us Europeans in the Middle East. And I hope it will continue, because this partnership is a good, stable block for the future and for the future cooperation. And I wish that Iran would be once in the same category as we have of the relations and spreading stability and trying to spread stability and of constructive engagement and behavior, because I think that everyone wishes that, not only from the distance, but everyone wishes that also in the Middle East.
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Tobias Elwood. I'm a former foreign minister from the United Kingdom. And can I firstly apologize for heckling you? It's not in the Globesec spirit. But I think the audience and indeed the moderator was taken aback a little bit about perhaps you're giving a pass to what's going on, because it does affect us all. As Dr. Anwar Gargash was saying, no stakeholder here is in control of events. What Israel is doing is no way translating military might, success on the battlefield, into any form of long-term strategy. And it doesn't just stop in the Middle East. This is the concern. What happens there, if the Red Sea is now blocked because of the Houthis responding, if the Straits of Hormuz are closed because of what Iran then does, that will affect everyone. And sir, you are a diplomat. So statecraft leadership now comes into it. What the EU can do as a collective voice, what the GCC can do as a collective voice, joining on with it, what ASEAN can do, other nations can do.
That's great, but we need a question.
That's what we need to be thinking about. That's what I seek from you, sir, leadership.
Okay, let's.
I think that Britain and France and the nation states of the Middle East can do more than the EU. And by the way, I didn't Brexit, okay? So I'm a proud member of EU. I'm proud member of EU. But as EU as such, we do not have the power to project power as the nation states do. And I think that's the difference. So EU has limited ability to support those nation states and those constructive players, and we should be doing that. Maybe it's not enough, but it's good, it's great. So we should be using that, but we should not be dreaming that we can do more, okay?
There's time for one more question, and I have a final question myself. Now that you speak about the role of the EU, there's an active conversation about what's going to happen between the EU and the Israel Association Agreement. There's a number of countries now that have openly said this has to be revised, and they have a qualified majority to open up the association agreement. Maybe not fully cancel it, but change parts of it. What do you think is going to happen?
I don't know. It may be cancelled, but I don't think it's a good path. I think we should be more closely working with those powers and those states in the Middle East than less. And if we think that we will be more credible in the Middle East, and if we think that we will be more players and more respected in the Middle East as EU, if we cancel the agreement, I guarantee it's not going to happen. It's not going to be the case. Okay, so this is the reality.
We have to really wrap, but we will do the final question as promised. From gentleman over here. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we're all very keen to see a quick end to this situation around Iran, whether in the region or in the European Union. But isn't the obvious diplomatic solution for this is for the European Union to call on Iran to quickly dismantle its nuclear program and announce an end to it? Isn't that something that the European Union can perhaps do? And wouldn't that be in the interests of peace before the situation escalates further, and perhaps also for the region?
I think it's much more to Donald Trump now what is going to be happening, what's going to be the dynamics, and I think we should wish him well that he succeeds, okay? Because he has a leverage and he can do something. The United States of America can do something. So I hope in their leadership, I hope in their success, and we should support them in their leadership and their success. Let's bear in mind, the international community, dozens of diplomats and dozens of diplomats have been trying to solve the issue of the Iranian nuclear program for 20 years. It didn't get better. I hope that there will be no issue of Iranian nuclear program as soon as possible. And at the end, it has been now tried militarily, and it will have to be ended diplomatically. And we should support that process. But let's hope for dismantling of the Iranian nuclear program, because if it stays, if it's there, then there will be no stability in the Middle East.
Dr. Gargash, final thought?
Final thoughts, I think, on both Iran and Israel. I mean, Iran is our neighbor. It'll always be our neighbor. It's geographically our neighbor. It's part of also a wider region of culture, trade, etc., etc. I think the last thing we want is to see a military action in Iran or destabilization in Iran, because we know that there is a ripple effect. So clearly we have an interest, a real interest, in not seeing this sort of escalation. And I think we came out very, very clearly condemning this. We understand that issues are very complicated, but we don't think they can be resolved militarily. I think vis-a-vis Israel, Israel is, again, a country where when we signed the Abrahamic Accords, we broke a lot of stereotypes, and we've established a full-fledged relationship with Israel. And our whole also idea was that to try and find a new narrative for the region. And I think, again, we persist with our relationship with Iran, and we persist also in using the Abrahamic Accords for the intention that we signed it for it to be a bridge and for it to break a lot of stereotypes in the region. Ultimately, the region has taught us time and again that a military escalation, a military action, a prolonged war does not resolve the fundamental issues that are there.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for taking our questions. We have reached the end of the session, so I want to give them also a round of applause, Dr. Gargash and Mr. Tomáš Pojar. Thank you very much for taking all of our questions. And I would also like to remind everyone that an extra session has been added on Israel, Iran, where we go from here at 6 p.m. today. So please check the program because this new session has been added. Thank you very much.